Greetings and welcome. Again, we're here at the Tronson Art Gallery in Springfield, Oregon. This is the Many Hats of Coco, and today we're going to be interviewing an artist, Rebecca LaMothe. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
That's correct, LaMothe.
She says it's correct, so it must be correct. And I am Theo Czuk. I'm the host of the show. And Rebecca, care to join me? Come on up.
Thank you. Thank you, Theo.
Certainly. Thank you so much for joining me today. And so I want to talk about your art. Now, you've actually had a show here at the Tronson Art Gallery.
I did. I was fortunate enough to have a little show here.
Yeah. Jim's generous with that. And so how long were you hanging here? And how many pieces did you
I was
have?
here for a month. I had, I think, this was part of a triptych. There were 3 of those and several others. You know, a small little showing. But
So just so we know, these are Rebecca's pieces behind us that will be joining us for the interview. So how did you get into your art? Have you always been an artist?
I kind of have. I've been doing art since I was a child. And I just always liked it, and it kind of, I don't know, met some inner need of mine. Plus, I got certain kind of satisfaction from the feedback I got as a child. That, oh yeah. And so that kind of kept me going too.
So are there other artists in your family? Is that
No. No other artists in the family.
And early influences then? What sent you in that direction?
I don't know. I grew up in small towns in Oregon. I didn't even go to a museum until I was, a young adult. That was the one here at the University of Oregon, was Asian art. So I don't know. It was just some kind of inner calling, I guess.
Huh. And when you started out, was there a particular medium that attracted you?
Well, I remember woodblock. I did some linoleum blocks as a young child, and painting, lots of different mediums. But I had some art teachers that were inspiring too, that saw something in me and put me aside and said, here's some oil paints. Why don't you use these for a while?
That was actually my next question. Were there some teachers that inspired
Yeah,
you?
Mr. Fredrickson in LeGrand, Oregon. He was one of the first that, here, try these oil paints, see what you can do, and just kind of let me have at him. I mean, he gave me a little bit of instruction, but not much. And then I had a high school teacher. I cannot remember her name. I was trying to the other day, but she was also very inspirational. I learned some calligraphy, and she introduced me to airbrush, which I did for a number of years with acrylics, and she just introduced me to a lot of different mediums, and I enjoyed that. Yeah.
So at a young age, you knew you would be following the artist path?
Well, I didn't know what that meant. I thought, oh yeah, I'm an artist, but I really didn't have any conception of what that meant in the world.
And what does it mean to you now?
That's a good question. I have to think about that for a second. Well, what does it mean to me now? Well, personally, as an artist, it means that I engage in creating art. Not all the time. I'm more of a person of being inspired, and I don't really make my living at it, so it gives me the luxury of doing it when I want to do it, I feel. And I think it means continually engaging in producing and creating, encouraging others. I believe is part of my mission I've done a lot of teaching and just encouraging other people to be engaged in their own creative process is part of it for me.
And what form do you teach in?
I haven't taught for a while. I taught when my son was younger, and I actually got a degree to teach art back in the late 60s, early 70s, but it meant going into the public school, which was really not a good fit for me. I wanted to just go do art and have adventures. That was my idea of being an artist, I think, is just to go have adventures and have experiences that would contribute to my art. And so it wasn't a good fit. I just went off. But I did teach, in many venues, alternative schools, art, gifted and talented, in the public school, just classes in my backyard. especially when my son was young, I did a lot of children's classes, and I would do them in parks or in the backyard or find places to do them. I was homeschooling my son, so I taught a lot of homeschoolers, and their parents wanted to do, you know, some things too. So, yeah, many variety of venues for teaching.
So you've been a lifelong artist. Has it evolved? Has it changed? And how might that have manifested?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I guess, you know, trying different mediums. You know, I did oils when I was much younger, but I didn't like the smells that were associated with oil painting. And so I kind of backed off on that and got into acrylics and was using an airbrush and pastels. I've done a lot of pastels. And now I'm doing mostly oils. I really like the medium of oils, and I can use oils that have walnut oil. And you don't have to use the same solvents, and they much, you know, they're much, you know, the aroma is much easier.
I didn't know about walnut oil, and does it take as long to dry? Is it a similar medium?
I think it's really similar,
yeah,
as linseed oil.
Because oil painting is an art of patience, isn't it? I mean, it takes a long time for those to dry. And
it does.
Yeah.
I usually have a number of paintings going at one time if I'm real active in the process, so that I can work on one and then let, you know, that dry. And I like to do layering and, you know, some glazing. You do transparent layers over other layers, but you have to make sure that. I mean, you can never make sure. You go to a museum and you see paintings where there's so much cracking, and that's because the underlayers have dried fast, and it's much slower than the overlayer, and it causes a kind of a cracking. As the underlayer, you know, shrinks, it cracks the, you know, the overlayer. So that's why you see that a lot. And so you don't know if you're really letting it dry enough, and if it's going to be effective till maybe 100 years from now. So we'll see. I won't be here to see it, but it's
so I find it curious that you have a number of works going at once. And what's your studio look like? Is it big?
Well, you know, I've had studios from the corners of a garage, the corner of a room. I always have some place I can do art. I have a very nice studio right now, which it will change pretty soon, but I mean, I've been in attics and basements and wherever, but right now it's in a sunroom of a house. And so I have light on the to the east and the south, but then there's a lot of trees outside, so in the summer it's pretty cool. And it's not that big. It's probably, you know, just this size, that, you know, this little area we're sitting in. And I just make do. I paint outside often, not plein air painting, but I'll take my painting out and work outside sometimes in the summer. Yeah.
And you said you have multiple pieces going at once. Do you have one easel and they take turns getting up there?
Yes,
or?
Basically, yes. They take turns. And if I have room in other rooms, I'll try to sit them someplace so I can, you know, I don't turn them away. I want to look at them once in a while. And then I see new things, you know, when I do that.
Do you ever have a problem with them, a couple of them calling for the easel at the same time?
No, not really. No, but it's...
They're patient, are they?
Well, I have to be patient. I have to think, okay, I'm going to do this on this one now, and then I may see something. I may hear a calling, you know, from another painting, but I'll just... That excites me. It's like, oh, when I get this part on this painting done, then I know what I'm going to do on that one. That's always kind of exciting. Yeah. A little inspiration.
Great. My next question, where do you get your inspirations from?
Well, it's always been difficult to describe my art, as you can see. It's not, you know, it's not your run-of-the-mill kind of representational art. I find my inspiration to be more inner, you know, inner feelings, you know, spiritual kinds of inspiration. It's more of an inner and then outer kind of process.
And that spirituality, is it coming from... were you raised to be a spiritual person, or does it this outlet that you find?
I probably was raised with the hope that I would be a spiritual person. But my parents, my mother was Mormon. She was brought up Mormon. My father was brought up Catholic, and neither one of them were very devoted to those religions. And so they looked for something that they could, you know, do with their family. I have two brothers, so they wanted their children to have some sort of, you know, religious background and spiritual background, and they joined the Methodist Church. So, and we moved a number of times. So it served a real social kind of thing, but it didn't answer most of my spiritual, yearnings and questions. So when I left home, I began to study Eastern religions, and my spiritual beliefs are kind of eclectic, and I have been to see a number of Hindu teachers. Speaking of, well, I shouldn't add that but Bill Sullivan was talking about Rajneesh, and I never really studied Rajneesh or was drawn to that, but that tradition, the Hindu guru tradition, has been significant. But I'm not a Hindu or a Christian I believe that there have been many, many high beings that have walked the planet, including Christ and Buddha and Muhammad, and probably there are now, but
Sounds like you've carved out your own spirituality.
yeah, I have kind of something that works for me. Yeah.
Is your work
Autobiographical?
Thank you. Because I'm a writer.
Autobiographical. Well, maybe from an inner plane, kind of. I could say that there was a period I was doing some pastels that were kind of, I was going through some things emotionally and maybe doing some therapy, and some of them were a little intense, and I wouldn't necessarily do that now. So you could say if somebody really lined them up, but not like many artists, I think, Yeah, I suppose on the inner planes, you could say that my work is somewhat autobiographical.
Well, that leads me to, what do you find the easiest and the most difficult part about being an artist?
Oh, the easiest is just to be inspired and go and start a piece and, and kind of watch it and feel it develop, have an inspiration. I think the hardest is when I attempt to do a business out of it.
Yeah,
that's always been difficult and not very enjoyable. And to tell you the truth, I haven't really had a lot of positive feedback in that area. So I have always done other jobs to really make a living. Many, many different things I've done in my life.
Well, do you find the community, the greater Eugene, Springfield community, supportive of your art?
I find them supportive of me as an artist and to do the art, and verbally feedback has been, a lot of positive. I've been involved in several kind of collective art enterprises, more alternative, and I find to be more at home there and more welcomed in a way at my art, because the art is very diverse and I fit in well with that. I had a show at a spiritual center, and my work was really well accepted, and I felt somewhat understood there. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting, because the next question that I had thought of was, what do you feel is your greatest accomplishment? Something that you're most proud of as an artist?
I believe this piece I just finished, it was a triptych, and there's trees on each side. And
so this is a triptych. So
this is a triptych, if you could imagine, trees on each side with more of those copper-colored pears all over it, and the root system and the mycelia. And that was a big accomplishment for me.
I actually have a confession to make. I did catch your show when it was at the Transit Gallery, and so it's easy for me to imagine that. Believe this feeling I'm feeling for someone like you, lost in the deepest gloom and despair. Then there's someone like you, someone like you, someone to answer for me, someone like you. A midnight dancer for me, someone like you. I thank the moon glow like you. And I sing this tune though. There's nothing to sing without someone like you. Someone like you. Someone to listen to me. Someone like you. With vision to see through me. Someone like you. Believe this feeling I'm feeling for someone like you, lost in the deepest gloom and despair. And there's someone like you, someone like you, someone to answer for me, someone like you. A midnight dancer for me, someone like you. Someone like you. Someone like
Coco has a question.
Coco, yes.
So you mentioned before that you had a son. At the time, did he inspire or impede your work? And do you have other children?
I have one son I had at the age of 41, and I wouldn't call it impeding, but I did give up art for 9 years because I was a single parent for one thing. He was ill when he was a baby, and yeah, it brings up some stuff, but he had cancer when he was very small, and I just couldn't do it, you know. I really had to quit because he needed all my attention for a number of years. So, yeah, I just let it go.
But there's richness in that I'm sure applied to your later.
One thing I learned, I would like to say from that, was that I learned that creative energy, which gets kind of stopped up in me, and that's when I really need to paint, that can go into anything. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to put that into child rearing. And so that's what I did. Yeah, and then when I could, thank you. Yeah. And then when I could start doing art again, I did things with him, did little things. And one quick story about that is that when he finished his treatment, he was 2 years old, and I set up this little area in a house we were living in, and I thought, oh, I'll do some art in here. Well, what happened was that for months, he went in there and he painted black and blue and brown, just the darkest things you can imagine. And he would do that, and in a few months he was done. He never did it again, but that gave me the idea that what a powerful, vehicle art is, and creating is for all of us, no matter what we're doing, whether it's art, whether it's visual arts, writing, music. It's such a powerful tool we have access to. Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So you were talking before about whether or not your inspirations were religious, but are any of your inspirations environmental?
Well, sure. I could, these pieces, the triptych, really have to do with this is supposed to be the goddess energy, and with the roots and the mycelia and how everything is connected, and that it's about trying to draw down this female goddess energy, and also accept the earth as the fecundity and fertility of the earth, and respect that for all peoples, not just women, but men and women. So yeah, I would say that was a big inspiration for me. Just what we need is a softness and a respect and a kind of a female yin energy here more. Yeah.
So do you recall images from your youth that you worked into your art?
Not so much. I did one piece after my mother passed away. I did several pieces that were about, her death. And one piece was about feeling that my mother was gone, not on the planet anymore, and what that's like. And I put a little picture of myself as a baby in there. And yeah, so that's the most literal kind of thing I've ever really done. A self-portrait I did, but no, not so much imagery. I think it's more just life experience that I bring forward.
Which is another question here. So do you feel your inspiration is more from the past or from the present?
Or the future?
I would say it's more from the present, although because I do gain a lot from my own emotional body, and a lot of that is from the past, but it's in the present that I need to express something. So it's more in the present, but I think it draws definitely on my whole life experience, really.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a preferred time of the day to work? Do you have different lighting that works better for you?
I love daylight. I used to work more at night when I was doing little things, a lot of illustration and that, but as I get older, I prefer the daytime. It doesn't have to be, it's really when I have a few hours that I can spare to go into the studio. It's hard to do art when you're just like trying to pull a few minutes here and there. So when I can do 4 or 5 hours, that's my favorite, and that's not every day. Yeah.
So what do you mean by airbrush?
Airbrush is a tool. You have a source of air like a compressor. I used a scuba tank for many years. You can hook on a gauge, and there's a tool. It's called an airbrush, and you put paint, and you can adjust it and allow the paint sprays out. It's like a sprayer. It's kind of like a small art version of when you see people painting homes. They have a sprayer and a compressor. Mm-hmm. This is a small, refined version. Mm-hmm. And you can spray large areas or small areas. I have a number of the tools, but you can't use oils in them. You can use acrylic. You have to clean them very carefully because they get clogged easily. But I haven't been able to use them so much since I prefer working in oils. But does that explain it in airbrush?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And what type of things did you do in airbrush? What was your...
The first word that comes to mind is kind of ethereal. The one reason I really love the airbrush is because you can do these really soft transitions of color and tone, and yeah, so I would say they were somewhat ethereal in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We have, I guess, one more question from the audience. Describe yourself without art in your life.
Oh, if there were, like a theoretical question, like if there was no art in my life? I don't know, sometimes I think I might have gone off the edge a few times. That art has kept me somewhat sane. Mm-hmm. Really, truly. I don't know that to be true, but knowing myself, I feel it may be true. I'm a much better, I'm a much more well-adjusted person doing art, with art in my life.
Thank you.
Thanks, Coco. That was very nice. I had one quick follow-up questions to these. You said that your son tried out all these dark colors for a couple years, and then
a few months.
A few months, and then they just disappeared. Does he paint, and are they liked? Yeah.
He did a few things. He's more of a musician.
Oh.
He developed a love of. He had a love of. Mm-hmm. He started playing violin quite young, mm-hmm. and he doesn't do much visual art. He, here and there, like a lot of kids, mm-hmm. but he has his own creative mm-hmm. expression.
That is a great outlet. So I would just like to really thank you for being here today. This is Rebecca LaMothe, and I wanted to talk about your hat, actually. You had brought a wonderful hat today. And is there anything you can say about that? Because we're going to put this up on the screen.
A friend of mine lived in the South Seas for a while. She lived in Grenada. Her husband was going to medical school there. And they would travel there often too. He became a psychiatrist. And when they traveled, they loved to go to visit different islands. And she brought this back on a trip one time. And I've had it for years. I don't often wear it, but sometimes it's just the right thing because it folds up.
It's so
and
much
you can,
fun.
you know, pack it away really easily.
Yeah.
It's not always so comfortable, but it's very, and it's a native design. People wear them on these islands. Yeah,
it's a lot of fun.
and tourists buy them, and I got one.
And Rebecca, do you have anything coming up that we should know about, or a website that we can peruse?
You know, my son made me a website for a while, and I kind of let it go at some point. It's, you know, I do minimal stuff on the computer. I have a Facebook page, and I sometimes post work, but I don't have a lot of, I don't have shows coming up. I had 3 wonderful shows last year, but my fiance and I are working on a remodel, and a rental, some rentals, and it's, I barely have time to paint right now, and so I can't really put together a show right now, but watch for me in the future.
Rebecca,
watch for that name.
Rebecca LaMothe. And could you spell your last name for us?
It's L-A space capital M as in mother, O-T-H-E, LaMothe.
Rebecca,
Yes.
thank you so much for
Thank you, Theo.
sharing this.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Rebecca.
Good question. Thank you.